everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Ask Natalie. Our topic this week is a little controversial, at least here in the United States. We're talking about firearms. Our letter writer this week, a woman who goes by the acronym SAS, which stands for Solo and Staying Safe, writes, "Dear Natalie, every time I go hiking or backpacking alone, my husband begs me to take a pistol and a rifle with me. They are really heavy and, knock on wood, I've never needed to use them. So nowadays, I usually tell him I won't bring them. He says he just wants me to be safe, but I think he's going a little overboard. Is it really that unsafe out there?" So let me start this off by saying I have no pony in this race. In fact, I prefer, when I'm faced with an enemy, be it human or wild animal, to challenge them to a dance-off. So with that said, I'm going to focus on common sense and statistics. Also, forewarning, I am probably going to trip over the word statistics at least a dozen times during this episode. Apologies in advance. So let's first look at population density. Just based on sheer numbers, we're all a lot more likely to suffer a violent crime, or any crime really, in population centers than we are in the backcountry. I mean, think about it. When you walk down a busy urban street, you pass dozens, maybe even hundreds of people who could potentially be mean, bananas, violent criminals waiting to prey on you. And the vast majority of the time, they don't. When you're in the backcountry, if you pass one or two other people, it's been a busy day. Plus, think about the kind of criminal who would be like, you know what, I'm gonna hike 20 miles, or I don't know, 40 some kilometers into the wilderness, hope there's a unsuspecting and or weak and or easily defeated person out there who has exactly what I want, do my crime, and then hike 20 miles back to civilization, which is where I most likely live. I mean, it just seems like a really inefficient criminal method. You know what I mean? So if you can go to the local Piggly Wiggly without being on high alert, I mean, barring that you don't have some major health issue like post-traumatic stress disorder, but if you can go out grocery shopping without being on high alert, then certainly there's no reason for you to be on high alert for criminals when you're out in the middle of nowhere, where there are very few other people. So to back up my hunch about this population thing, I looked up the rates of violent crimes, specifically murder, rape, and aggravated assault in American national parks. And what I found is that in recent years, the crime rates for those specific crimes in our national parks here in the United States were remarkably low. I mean, super duper 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 low, especially when compared to the crime rate in the United States at large. We're talking maybe 1/1000% of visitors to American national parks experienced one of those violent crimes. And unfortunately, the rate among the rest of the United States was much, much higher. So there's this overarching message I'm getting when I'm paging through the internet and journals that it's generally a lot safer, at least in terms of crime, in the backcountry than anywhere where most of us live anyway, unless you've got a cabin out in a mountain somewhere. So then let's also talk about injury, because when we think about staying safe in the outdoors, we also think about avoiding injury. And when I looked into this, I found a couple of interesting pieces of info I want to share. The first is there is a common idea that adding weight to your pack is likely to cause, or is potentially, I don't want to say likely, but it can potentially lead to injury. So the research that's been done has a lot of confounding factors, you know, things like trail conditions or weather or the experience of the hikers. But there's a definite indication that when people add more weight, such as, for instance, the weight of a rifle and a pistol, when people add that extra weight to their back, they are more likely to get injured. And when we get injured in the backcountry, we're automatically setting ourselves up for other unsafe things, you know, being stuck somewhere, hypothermia, blah, blah, blah. So extra weight, maybe not the best thing in the world. The science, the research isn't super direct, but it's possible. It's a very real possibility. The other thing that, as a woman, I found this funny, and apologies to my male peeps in advance. I looked up search and rescue statistics, and dudes, you guys are you are frequent flyers when it comes to search and rescue. Holy moly. So there's this agency called DBS Productions, and they track all sorts of statistics in the United States for search and rescue missions. What they found is that 80% of search and rescue missions are going out trying to find a dude, and only 20% of search and rescue missions are going out trying to find a woman. So that's a big difference. The vast majority of search and rescue missions are trying to save men. Here's an additional layer of ugh, or haha, depending on how you look at it. Of those 80% of search and rescue missions that are out looking for men, 12% of the men perish before rescuers reach them. They die. 12%. Of the 20% of search and rescue missions that go out trying to find women, 9% of the women die before search and rescue reaches them. Fewer women call in the first place, and fewer women die while they wait rescue. So we don't know why this is. I mean, it could be that the women that got search and rescue missions sent on them were like super outdoors women who knew everything, and the men were like, I don't know, dumb people. Who knows? I mean, it could be also that the men were just risk takers and the women were really nervous Nellies and they didn't take any risks. We don't know why. We just know that there's a statistical significance between men and women and their susceptibility to finding themselves in a tough situation in the backcountry. Last little piece of interesting information about firearms. Bears. People will say, oh, I need to carry a gun for bears. It's not a bad idea, right? Well, a couple years back, a group of researchers published their findings in the Journal of Wildlife Management, and they did this study on the efficacy of guns versus bear spray, you know, good old-fashioned bear spray. And what they found is nothing. They found absolutely no indication that firearms were any more effective than good old-fashioned $24.95 bear spray. And there's a little additional layer here too. They found that for the gun to be effective at all, the person shooting it had to be incredibly skilled. We're talking they had to be Annie Oakley. And not just Annie Oakley on like a normal Tuesday. They had to be Annie Oakley under extreme survival conditions. Let me tell you what, if you shoot a bear and you don't kill her, she is going to be pissed. Better to use bear spray. So, the bottom line is, sass, decide for yourself. I mean, ultimately, women are told left and right that the outdoors is unsafe for us and we should stay home and we should stay safe and we shouldn't explore, and that's all. If carrying a gun makes you feel more empowered and makes you feel more comfortable in the outdoors, then do it. If you feel like it's unnecessary added weight, then leave it at home. I mean, obviously a gun can't be a substitute for any of the 10 essentials. A gun can't filter water or give you directions, but if it can make you feel a little bit more confident and you don't mind the extra weight, why not? Do you? The rest of us will practice our dance moves and prepare for our next dance off. See you next week. Bye.